listed. So let's start off. I want to talk a little bit about the anatomy of the spine, go over some basic stuff that I could point out, and these may be things that you know or you don't know. But, well, the first thing is, and I'm sure most people are familiar with, obviously there are really three major segments of the spine, which is cervical, thoracic, and lumbar. The cervical, of course, being in the neck, the thoracic being in the chest, where the ribs are, and the lumbar being beneath the thoracic and above the sacrum. Each vertebra in the spine has some consistent features that are similar. The first is obviously a vertebral body, which is a large surface area in the front that provides most of the stability and support in the spine. And everything behind the vertebral body are considered the posterior elements. The posterior elements are connected to the vertebral body by this bone on either side called the pedicle, and the ring that's created is the spinal canal. The structural support, the way that the spine stands up, I like to think of it as sort of tripods that are inverted on top of one another, so that there are really 3 points of contact that enable the spine to stay up, each segment attached to the next. The biggest point of contact is the vertebral body, and the two others are the facet joints in the rear. So with those 3 points of stability, like a three-legged stool, we can have stability within the spine. And obviously the ligaments provide additional structural support in the disc between the vertebra. But that's an important way to sort of conceptualize how our spine provides basic structural stability so that we can stand up. In the back is the spinous process, which is the little bump we all know that sticks out from behind. And the normal spine has a lordosis in the cervical and lumbar region and a kyphosis in the thoracic region. So just starting out with some of that basic anatomy, let's just discuss a little bit about what's unique then, what differentiates the cervical, the thoracic, and the lumbar regions. And although the anatomy is essentially the same, there are a couple of very important distinctions. The first is at the C1 to 2 level. C1, the first cervical vertebra, has no vertebral body. It's really just a ring. And what's happened through the process of evolution is that the vertebral body is within the body of C2 and sticks upward. And this is the odontoid, or dens, depending whether you like Greek or Latin roots. And so the ring of C1 is somewhat unique in not having its own vertebral body, and that of course makes it susceptible to a range of different kinds of trauma that can occur to the dens. Odontoid fractures being a very common ailment, particularly in the elderly when they fall, and we treat a fair amount of that. The other unique feature in the cervical spine is that there are these little holes on the side, these little foramina on the side, which are the foramen through which the vertebral artery travels. The vertebral artery is only traveling up through the sides of the spine in the neck. That doesn't exist lower down. And of course, the vertebral arteries are 2 of the 4 major blood vessels that supply the brain with blood, the other 2 being the carotid arteries. About 25% of your cardiac output, 25% of the blood pumped through the heart goes to the brain. So the vertebral arteries have a tremendous amount of blood pouring through them and are critically important. Injury to one or both of the vertebral arteries can result in a major brainstem stroke or death. So when we talk about cervical trauma or cervical injuries, the risk of injury to the vertebral arteries is significant. So those 2 features are important. And then, of course, the spinal cord sits within the spinal canal, and at each level, the spinal cord gives off a nerve root. And I kind of liken the exiting nerve root to sort of being like exit ramps along the freeway. At each level, it's a predictable exit of a nerve root. And each of those nerve roots, as I'm going to discuss with you briefly, has a predictable function. There we go. Okay, so in the lumbar spine, a couple of